Hi everyone, and welcome back to That's Mental. Today I want to start a video series on workplace trauma. Okay, I want to talk about the impact of working in a toxic environment, or it could also be known as workplace trauma. Like I've mentioned before in a few of my videos, I find that some of these topics associated to trauma are less touched upon. We hear a lot about what we might call the big T trauma. So as you could imagine, for example, war veterans or other more intense and big types of trauma. But trauma can happen at any time in any situation. You can be traumatized by something, and it can also happen in the workplace. I think it's important to touch upon these different types of trauma. And I would say that working in a toxic environment, having experienced it myself, is definitely traumatic. So today that's what I want to talk about. I want to share a little bit about my experience. Why do I call it traumatic? So that in case you've experienced something similar or this resonates with you, then you know that you're not alone. This is a video that I've been building up to and that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. But to be honest, it's also been a little bit hard for me to make because it means that I have to revisit certain events of my past and in some cases relive some of these traumatic moments. So, it's not been easy, and that's why it's taken me so long to get around to it. So I want to share this story and this series overall because it contains a learning, and I hope that by sharing it you can also learn from my experiences and my mistakes. So in my older videos, if you've watched those, I talk about having my trust broken in the workplace. I've talked about all of my burnouts and my previous negative experiences. And if you've been following this channel for a while, or if you've watched any of those videos, then you will know that all of those experiences were really pretty traumatic for me. Like I said at the beginning, I believe that if you work in a toxic environment, if you have toxic colleagues, if the workplace as a whole is toxic, then it can most definitely be traumatic to you. In my case, I want to share an example of some of the things that caused me the most trauma or were the most traumatic for me, or maybe even reminded me of previous trauma that I've experienced in my life. I'm not saying that this was conscious at the time, but I'm saying that this could have triggered some of the reactions that I had. To start with, I lived in fear of making a mistake and the subsequent consequences of that. So, getting shouted at, getting shamed, getting told off, getting into trouble. So I was basically terrified of making a mistake or of doing anything wrong and how that would reflect on me and my work. I lived in fear of being bullied by my colleague. I've also talked about that. This person using a loud voice, threatening me, raising their voice, making me feel ridiculed or as if I'd done something wrong. Also, commenting on my work in a negative way or telling me that my work wasn't good enough. So basically all of this behavior was sort of guilt tripping, manipulation, fear tactics, and basically I feared the interactions with this person and I was afraid of meeting them at work. So this definitely made me on edge. Another thing I experienced was being pitted against other colleagues. So, when we are turned against each other, when we're put in competition, being made to second guess the nature of my relationship with certain colleagues, not being able to know or to be certain whether I could trust these people or not, whether they were really, on my side or people I could count on, or whether they might use something against me. So again, constantly being in fear, not knowing who you can trust. I was also made to feel responsible and bear a huge weight of responsibility for our overall success or failure. It wasn't limited to one person or one experience. I would say that as a whole, this huge feeling of responsibility was really overwhelming. And other colleagues would use this sense of responsibility as a way of offloading their own responsibility or happily just letting me carry the whole weight of that responsibility and just letting me push myself harder and work harder because of that. The micromanagement and being watched every step I took, being made to feel as if I couldn't be trusted, constantly being watched, this was extremely stressful as well. Not to mention that this micromanagement also made me feel like I was never doing a good enough job. Being made to jump through hoops to get any kind of promotion, any kind of responsibility, recognition, being made to feel like you're doing well in the company. This was extremely difficult, and like I said before in other videos, came with its own set of, tests. Gaslighting by colleagues and bosses. I cannot stress this enough. When you tell people in the workplace that you have too much work, that you're struggling with the workload, or that something bad is happening to you, and people don't believe you, people call into question what you're experiencing. They will tell you that it's not that bad. They will tell you that you must be imagining it. They will tell you, no, it can't be that. This person didn't mean it that way. All kinds of stuff. This type of gaslighting is so negative and detrimental to your mental health. So anybody who gaslights you into second guessing yourself again makes this experience 10 times worse, and this only adds to the trauma. So on top of all of these things, of course, like I've explained in other videos, the feeling of being extremely alone in this situation. And I know that this is work, so it's not that people are supposed to be there running behind you, being your protectors, your parents. No, of course, in the workplace, you do have to figure things out for yourself. But there's a difference between that and feeling extremely lonely and alone in these high pressure environments when you need to have, at minimum one person, one colleague who's going to have your back and who will be there, who you can kind of tag team with and protect each other. So when you feel all alone in this situation, it just amplifies it and makes it worse. The extreme sleep deprivation was awful, and the constant feeling of being on edge and the anxiety only accentuated all of the above. And then last but not least, and I touched upon it at the very beginning of the video, having my trust broken, this huge betrayal for me was massive, especially considering what I know now about my past experiences. This was very re-traumatizing for me. So yeah, as I've been saying, your body and your brain can never shut down and never rest from this constant stress that you're experiencing. And I've also explained with the trauma how your brain gets stuck on repeat, right? So it's constantly scared, it's constantly, waiting for the next bad experience, and it's in the loop. And I also talked about how because of this loop and the fact that your brain is stuck, you develop these trauma responses. So basically you react in a way that you're not even aware of it to certain situations that either happen or that you're expecting to happen. So as you can imagine, you're just in this constant survival mode on all levels. With that in mind, all of these experiences that I just described to you, for me, but of course you might be experiencing your own, this is what I consider starts to create the workplace trauma. It might not be one person only, although of course it could be the case if you had somebody that was harassing you, but it can be the general environment that is just traumatic for you. And for me, this was definitely the case. It was a traumatic experience over time. And when I say that I had PTSD from my job, from this project, from this toxic environment, this is what I'm relating to. This is what I'm referring to. Why? Because I was living in fear of one or more of these behaviors happening again. So you could say, I was living in fear of being bullied again. I was living in fear of having my trust broken again, or not knowing who I could trust in the workplace. I was living in fear of being overwhelmed with work. This one for sure I recognize. Even until recently, I kind of am in constant fear of getting overwhelmed with work, being given too many projects, not having my boundaries respected. And so because of that, I was on edge all the time and expecting, waiting for this to potentially happen again. And it meant that I couldn't relax properly or adapt very well to my new work environments. This was most noticeable to me when I left the agency and I started working in a new job. I was afraid, for example, of not being able to make mistakes and being reprimanded for it. That was also something I was really afraid of in the beginning. It was very difficult for me to trust people and know that they were going to be friendly and they didn't mean me any harm. And I know that sounds crazy, but really I realized it when I started a new job, how difficult that was for me. I was afraid, I was mistrusting of new colleagues, especially those in a position of authority that I kind of perceived as a threat to me. I'm not really somebody who perceives others as a threat, but I think because of this past experience, I just really didn't know if I could trust them. And for a while, how this manifested, apart from the fear, was that all I knew how to do, like the only way I knew how to behave at work, was to be extremely assertive and almost aggressive and you know, like push back aggressively, but also push my way into meetings, push my way into conversations, and yeah, just be aggressive in my behavior, because it was the only way that I knew how to be heard, how to stand my ground, and how not to feel like I was getting pushed around. So it was crazy to me to kind of take a step back and observe my behavior and recognize that it really wasn't a fit for the new place that I was working in. And it took me some time to adapt and learn new behaviors. This was, of course, all due to the trauma and the traumatic experiences I'd had that I just wasn't able to switch off just yet. And it took me a while, 6 months, maybe even a year, to be honest, to get used to it. This is gonna sound crazy, but it took me a while to adapt to people that were just genuinely friendly and open and caring, and not be suspicious of them and feel like I was gonna have to fight them off any second. I just, you know, as you can tell, I just didn't know what to expect, and I had to unlearn all of these old behaviors. So to conclude for today and to kind of wrap up this video, my goal here was really to show you a little bit what it can look like, both to be traumatized in the workplace, like what might count as traumatizing. And if you followed this channel, then you will know that of course this is going to be very unique for each person, right? We don't all have the same history, we don't all have the same past. Different things will be re-traumatizing or traumatizing for different people. But my goal here is just to kind of give a few examples of what it could be like, and you know, what is workplace trauma? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What can happen to create it? And, you know, just like with any other type of trauma, and as I explained, this can leave you feeling scarred. You can take time, you will need time to recover from it. And it's very important, I think, to develop the awareness, not just of what it looks like, of how it makes you feel, but also later on of yourself, your past, maybe what could be triggering this in you, and you know, how you can deal with it. So if there's anything else that you want to know about workplace trauma, any comments that you have, any questions that you have, not comments, but also any comments, you can just let me know in the comment box. Don't hesitate to reach out. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe and turn on notifications for when I publish new videos. Thanks.